So Premier, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we walk into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your backgrounds? Where did you grow up?
So good day, and really good to join you. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be on this platform. So I was born in Johannesburg in South Africa. I was born, my parents had moved to Johannesburg, were working in Johannesburg, lived in the city, but had just purchased a small farm. And so I grew up the first years of my life growing up on a farm. It was back then, that is in 65 when I was born, 65 to probably 75, even towards just before 80, growing up on this farm. It was an organic farm. And in those days, the organics, I think, were still quite new in South Africa. My mother was the farmer, and then my father had some factories. So I had a sort of like balance between a farm life as well as every now and again seeing what commercial activity looked like and assembly plants and manufacture. And I think that was a great basis for for setting me up for life. You learn how to do things for yourself when you live in a rural area. You learn that things aren't readily available. So I think it was a great grounding for me that ends up as a politician. But there was also many other things on the way to becoming a politician. But yeah, that was my early part of my life.
Thank you. And Premier, can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
So when I was really young, I thought I wouldn't mind being a farmer, like my mother. I quickly switched to tell everybody I'd rather be a millionaire than a farmer. But I don't know if I really had a real dream passion. I enjoyed life, and in actual fact, the last few years of my school career, my parents actually sold the farm and we moved to a small town called Knysna, where my interests then became scuba diving and water skiing and the beach and fishing and boating, and so it sort of influenced a different part of my growing up. At one stage, I thought electronics was something that might have interested me, but I ended up becoming an entrepreneur.
And Premier, can you tell us who inspired you in your early days?
So I think the reason I became an entrepreneur is because of my early life on a farm and the factory and the factories that my dad had, assembly lines and manufacture. And my father definitely influenced a lot.
Sorry?
I don't know what that is.
No, that was in the background. Apologies. Please carry on.
Okay. My father definitely influenced me a lot when it came to sales and marketing. Both of my parents, when it came to kind of the business side, because you'd hear talk about business on the dinner table at night. And then my father was also the kind of guy who would, we'd be somewhere and he'd see something. I'll never forget the one day he saw a yogurt machine and he thought, I'm going to buy this yogurt machine. And my mother was quite excited because he came home with a yogurt machine. We lived on a farm. We had cows on the farm as well as fruit. And so she was quite excited about the yogurt machine. And he said, no, I haven't bought it for you. I've bought it to take to pieces to see if I can manufacture it. So that's what he would do. He would look at something and say, well, I'm sure I could get someone to make that part and I could get someone to make this part and I would make this part and we'd put it together and we'd have a product. So I think that definitely influenced me. And then I actually left school. I went to the Navy and I was in the Navy for a while, but then ended up going back and getting involved in my parents' business for a short while. And then from there started, starting my own businesses. And I ended up with 10 companies, not in any specific space. They were all, if there was a need, if there was a problem, I would find the solution for the problem, and that's how the business was started.
And Premier, can you tell us, how did you go from business into public service?
Yeah, so that was also one of those things that just took place. In 1994, South Africa became a democracy. I was a young guy, busy starting my businesses. I was very happy that we were now a democratic country. I'd grown up in a family who were not directly involved in politics, but I grew up in a family that was always in support of political activity. I remember storing posters of political parties at our house or on our farm. I remember being there on election day. So I grew up with that part of politics. I had parents that were supportive of liberal democracy in our country. And so in 1994, I was involved in my businesses, voted, but that was about it. In 1995 was the local government elections, again, voted. And then in 1996, the rural elections took place. And I was based in a rural space where we were going to vote again. And at that stage, there were only two political parties standing, and I didn't want to vote for either of them. And ended up becoming an independent because I was quite vocal about local issues. Ended up becoming an independent in 1996 at the local council. Served there for, I suppose, until about 1998. Then I resigned. I was asked by various political parties to get involved in much stronger politics. So I resigned being an independent, joined the Democratic Party, and got myself elected in 1999 to the provincial parliament. And I've been there. I was in opposition for 10 years after that. And now this is my 14th year in government. So I'm not in business anymore, but I still do exactly the same thing. I still look at a problem and look for a solution for that problem.
And it looks like we're not going to run out of problems anytime soon. So
definitely not.
So Premier, can you tell us what is driving you today?
Well, right now, I love innovation, and I'm passionate about the economy. I think that came through, in my growing up time, seeing markets happen. Either agricultural products going to market or factories manufacturing products for market. Then in my own businesses doing exactly the same thing. So I'm always passionate, even in government, about how do we grow the economy? How do we find opportunities? How do we make sure we're removing red tape and got the right skills for the new economy? So that is a kind of underlying driver. But then it's, what are the problems? And for me, obviously, safety is a big problem. So I put a lot of time and energy into safety and the safety plan. Now in South Africa, our big issue is energy. We have got a huge shortfall in our ability to provide enough electricity for the economy. And so even though that's not a provincial government mandate, that's become like, my next thing. So I suppose the two big things I focus on as a premier in a government are now safety and energy. And then, of course, the government mandate primarily is about healthcare, the education system, the economy, and those departments that support that kind of ecosystem. And then the role that we play at local government. But my personal kind of focus at the moment is, I suppose, solutions for safety and solutions for energy right now.
Now, Premier, looking into the future, what does the future of leadership mean to you?
So I must say that if I look at global issues that the world is facing, and I look at where the world is going, I must say I'm quite concerned about global leadership, just as I'm really concerned about leadership in South Africa, in our country. And yeah, I think I'll start internationally. What has concerned me in the last few years is how I've seen real resurgence of populism, of nationalism, the breaking down of what was being built up through the European Union, and seeing the exit of the UK, looking at the Trump era in America. Now, of course, dealing with the Russia-Ukraine war. And I mean, I look at what's happening between Russia and the Ukraine, and it kind of like says to me, well, what's happening here? The world's going back 100 years. Have we not learned any lessons? And maybe in that aspect, I was also very influenced by a book after the pandemic, written by a professor from Oxford University. He wrote this book called Rescue. Ian Golden is his name. And he basically says, where are we going in the world? After the end of the Second World War, the world changed a lot. We learned lessons, and the United Nations was born. Many countries became democracies. We saw a lot of people coming out of poverty. We saw economic growth after the recession. Things happen that are global, happenings, and the world learns and does things differently. And between then and the kind of millennium, you saw a lot of positive happening in general across the world. And then after that sort of time, I think you started to see what I'm talking about: populism and more right-wing movements happening, nationalism playing a much stronger role. And that was concerning to me in general. And then the pandemic hit, and that was a time, and that's what this book talks about. It talks about this pandemic. Is this pandemic something to wake the world up to say, we need to think differently about the world? And is this pandemic and happening in the world like the end of the Second World War, is this a time that the world is going to think differently and behave differently and look to the future differently? And quite frankly, I'm thinking that was the opportunity, but it's not being taken up. And that does worry me, because, looking at trends across the world, I think it's time for leaders to think differently and to behave differently. And I think we've got a big task ahead of us across the whole planet. And then thinking about South Africa, we've also got just as a dire situation. We've got a lot of failure at a national government level. I'm talking about energy, but we've got high youth unemployment. We've got high unemployment. We've got high crime rates. We've got big issues that face us as society. And how do we get behavior change? How do we get policy change? How do we get government think to change to create better enabling environments? And, that's got to come through leadership. It's got to come through political leadership. It's got to come through business leadership. It's got to come through citizen and civil society leadership. And so I think we're sitting in a very worrisome time in the world, and I think we're sitting at a worrisome time, here in our country, and where I'm involved in a province, in a government where you, as a political leader, you actually have power. You have the ability to get people to think differently and to try different things. And sometimes it feels that it's almost something that can't be done. But I suppose in the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it is done. And so you've got to choose those things, those impossible things, and you've got to take them on and see if you can bring about those changes.
And Premier, can you tell us, what have you learned from your own leadership journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
So I think, my early life as an entrepreneur, I think you learn lessons about yourself in leading people within your own corporate environment or your own business environment. So it's small teams of people, and at the end of the day, it's always about people. Whether it's a big corporate business, whether it's a government, whether it's a department, or whether it's the citizens that you serve or your customers that you serve, at the end of the day, it's about people. So I think I learned a lot about people, myself, my ability to engage, to work with people, to build teams, to understand weaknesses and strengths, and fill those gaps with people who can, bring and add value to where you are weak, that you bring people in to make sure you're creating a sort of whole person, or a whole image, a whole vision, or a whole team. And that definitely stood me in good stead in the next stage of my life. And then I spent quite a bit of time, well, I was lucky enough to spend 10 years in opposition in politics. So when you're in opposition, it's a much easier job because you can just sort of analyze and criticize and put a couple of ideas on the table, but you don't really have to do much with it. And then, of course, the next 10 years I was in government. I held executive office. I had a couple of nice portfolios. I was the Minister of Finance. I was the Minister of Economic Opportunities. That included tourism and agriculture. I also purposefully took on a job at the end of that 10-year period as the Minister of Policing in the region, safety and security, or in our case, as a government, we have got safety oversight, and I took a position of community safety. But that helped me frame my intention to put my hat in the ring for Premier, because I had to think, what would I want to take on? And safety was that issue. Our structure in South Africa, I believe, is wrong. It doesn't give much federal power to provinces. Much of it sits at a national level, and I think the power should be closer to the people. So that's what I campaigned on, and that's why safety is still much of my passion. And I think obviously drawing on those lessons helps you when you suddenly get given this massive job, where my job is to, pick a cabinet, appoint heads of department to run a government where we have 87,000 staff members. So now suddenly not a little business where I've got 20 or 50 staff. Now this organization is a big organization. It's got an 81 billion rand budget, 87,000 officials. They're also different because you've got treasury officials to teachers in education, to nurses in healthcare, to planners, to lawyers. I mean, it really is. It's a diverse team that you have to lead. But I think those lessons really help you in crafting your own vision, and then enabling you to lead the team, and then of course be responsive to your customers, who are the citizens who I now have to account to.
Now, Premier, as you said, these are challenging times, and as the world is stumbling from one crisis into the next, what is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
I don't know. It's really difficult because when I was elected as the Premier 4 years ago, my new challenge was safety, and how do I bring about a safer environment? And it very soon became a pandemic, which no one studied for, no one trained for, no one knew what was going to happen. You've got to become responsive. You've got to become immediate. You've got to become, that is your time. And you've caught that ball, and now you've just got to deal with it. So I really don't know what those big challenges are into the future. I mean, we can assume in our part of the world, it's going to be climate change and the influence on availability of water. We've got a crisis on energy. I definitely think it's going to be the skills of the future. What do the future jobs look like? As AI and robotics start playing a different role in our world, what does that mean for humanity? And those are the things I think about. And what are those future jobs? And how do you add value? How does the human life become worthwhile? And how do we make sure we bridge those gaps between poor and rich? Gini coefficients. We've got a huge Gini coefficient here in South Africa, and that is a big challenge on its own. And of course, as the world changes, are those Gini coefficients going to get much bigger, or are those the opportunities for future leaders to be challenging right now? So for me, my challenges now are use the lessons from the pandemic, which taught me how to innovate far quicker, how to get rid of red tape far quicker, how to understand and sift out the mess from what you need to get done by tomorrow, change management models, take ideas and try them. If they don't work, chuck it out and put the next idea in very quickly. Those were the lessons that I learned. So how do I apply them now to our next challenges, which still is safety, or right now is energy? We don't have enough energy. We're having right now what we call late stage 6 load shedding. That means 10 hours of no electricity in your household if you live across South Africa. It's probably about 8 hours less of electricity if you live in the city of Cape Town, because there's already some innovations coming in. But that's a big challenge right now. Water, I think, is the one behind it, and that's definitely influenced by climate change. Then probably getting our trading platforms right with the world as it becomes more competitive, but being prepared for whatever that next epidemic is. It's about enabling yourself to be responsive, I suppose.
Right. And Premier, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are maybe one or two new skills you would want to factor in?
So, I mean, a thing that we are busy with in our government is about values-based culture. That means, how do you interact with people, and how do you keep learning in that space? I think too often it's seen as a soft, fluffy side of your organization, of your business, the culture of your organization. I think empowering yourself far more in culture and values helps you deal with other things. And so definitely I would build much more of that into that curriculum. I would then, I mean, what I also believe in is innovation, and enabling innovation and changing thought patterns and allowing yourself to be challenged. I think too often ego gets in the way, and so you must allow yourself to be challenged, and allow your thinking to be challenged from an innovation point of view. How do we land innovation quicker? Things are changing so much faster today than they've ever changed at any time in our world history of humanity. And our problem is, I don't know if we're quick enough to adapt. And so how do you embrace innovation and enable innovation? So I would definitely spend culture, innovation, and then, I mean, obviously, for me, it would also empower yourself. Probably it's a balance. If you had to choose the third thing, climate change, the global impacts, either that or what is the future of AI and technological innovations and their impact on us. I don't know between those two, but probably maybe even link of the two together.
Thank you. And Premier, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
So let me say this in general, is I really support bringing young people into our systems. In our political party, we've got a program called the Young Leaders. In actual fact, we've got two. One is Young Leaders, which focuses quite a lot on graduates. The other one is Young Leaders that are other people other than graduates, and enabling them to be part of a political system should they choose, but also knowing that that political understanding from our own internal programs is going to be embedded in future business leaders, etc. And I really do. I'm involved in them all the time, engaging with them, part of mentorship programs sometimes, welcoming them to these programs, enabling wherever possible. So I really like doing that. And then what I've seen over the last few years is how they've played a role in our government. So right now in my cabinet, I probably have on average one of the youngest cabinets out of all provinces in South Africa. And I have 3 ministers in my cabinet who come through the Young Leaders program. I have a speaker in our parliament who comes through the Young Leaders program. The other one, which is called Imbewu, we see councillors coming through. I see members in the parliament coming through those programs, which is really enabling young people to come into the system. And I think politics, and one of our big challenges in the world, is you normally see in politics insufficient young people voting, insufficient young people taking part. And I'm really excited about bringing younger people, in putting them into responsible positions, because I think that also goes to my past point about how do we enable innovation and different ways of thinking. And just bringing in younger people actually sometimes is quite scary, because they want to ride the roller coaster sometimes faster. But I'd much rather be the person saying slow down than not having or saying, come on, we need some more action here. So yeah, and then it's exciting to see young people that you've been involved in. And I mean, I talk about mentoring. I don't know how much of it rubs off, but you hope that some of it does. But you watch the pathway and you think, well, maybe I had a hand in it, and that really is exciting.
And Premier, looking back over your own leadership journey, are there any role models of leadership that you encountered and recommend future leaders should follow and learn from?
So definitely, I think I was influenced, as I said in the beginning, by my father and my mother, definitely. And then maybe in growing up, probably my uncle as well. My father was never the practical guy. My uncle taught me to weld, taught me to spray paint, taught me to, do the mechanical stuff, worked on lathes, that kind of stuff. And then as I moved on in life, I mean, I think of an art teacher that influenced me. And then I want to say that, obviously there are people that I've worked with, past premiers like Vanzilla, people that I've worked with in government, officials in government I've worked with over the years that have definitely had an influencing fact. But I also have been influenced by world leaders as well. I like reading autobiographies. I like reading autobiographies of political leaders and also business leaders. So, definitely you'll see a range of political leaders from East and West. You'll see even local political leaders, but then also business entrepreneurs that have changed the world. And I like drawing little bits from each of their experiences and then trying to bring them forward in what I do, in trying to impart lessons on what happens or learn lessons from what they've had to go through in their processes.
Finally, Premier, how can our listeners connect with you and where should they follow you?
Okay, so obviously I've got all of the social media platforms, at Alan Winde, Twitter accounts. I've got accounts on Facebook. I've got accounts on Instagram, etc. I mean, you can Google Alan Winde and get my mobile number and phone me, or you can get one of those platforms, or you can get my email address. We also try to do some proactive communication. I started something during the pandemic where we did what we call a Digicon every single week. I had some professor or one of our own people on with our dashboard, making it public every single week. Right now, I'm running a weekly Digicon that talks about the energy crisis. We interact with the public, looking at small embedded generation, SMME support, the grid system, the just energy transition, because those are critical issues that are pertinent right now. I try to be very sort of involved and through that public platform. I like to think I'm quite accessible, although as more and more followers on these platforms become engaging, it's harder and harder to be the person that actually replies yourself. I spend a long time late into the night doing the emails and the social media replies, as well as very early in the morning again. Probably influence from Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and each of them allocating a certain amount of time to a certain amount of a certain platform. Richard Branson influenced a lot of the stuff that I do. Right down to political leaders, and then also analyzing what do people say. They talk about politicians in ivory towers. I've tried to do the opposite. I still run something that I haven't seen done anywhere in the world. Every first Thursday of the month, I and my government are available for anybody to walk in off the street and come and see us face to face. So I've been doing this now for 7 years, and I've been doing it now for 4 years as the Premier. So, and then during the pandemic, when we weren't able to see face to face, I was on live on 27 radio stations, and anybody could phone in or message in. And now we do it in person again. I normally do it at our seat of government, except this next one I will be doing out in the Hermanus region. So it's going out to the region. So every now and again I go to parts of the province, and I don't know any other government that does that, where the whole government, officials in the administration and the politicians and anyone can come and see us, and we will sit there and talk to you face to face until the last person has been served. And that's what that's an innovation that we brought in. And now when I go to the election, when people always say, yeah, but you're never contactable and we only see you at voting time, I can say, no, that doesn't happen with me. Because it's about trying to break those stereotypes and those molds.
Thank you. And Premier, last but not least, in terms of your leadership legacy, if I may ask, what would you like to be remembered for?
If I had to be remembered for one thing, it was probably, I would like to be remembered as innovative change. I don't know if that was what I will be remembered for. In the beginning of this term, I would have said to you, jobs, 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 because that is what I really am passionate about. But very soon became safety, 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 and then it became pandemic, pandemic, pandemic. And I mean, I saw quite a lot of leadership elevation during the pandemic time. But why was it? It was because of innovation. So we built the biggest field hospital on the African continent, and we built it in 6 weeks. We delivered more than 2 medicine parcels to people's homes where they used to queue at our clinics and our hospitals, but they were the most vulnerable because they were the elderly or they had comorbidities. And so we used partnerships with Uber or DHL and our health system and NGOs on the ground, and we delivered people's medicine to their door. We won awards for our dashboard system. We did technology around innovation around oxygen, nasal, high pressure nasal oxygen. I mean, but at the end of the day, it was dealing with a pandemic, but it was about the innovation. It could be dealing with jobs, but hopefully it's about the red tape innovation. It could be dealing about safety, but it's about the technology innovation. So if I had to then say, what would it be? I hope it's this guy embraced innovation that made a difference.
Premier, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and for inspiring so many future leaders.
It is only a pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity and the platform.